Welcome to The Third Story, episode 42. How cool is that? Doing this podcast is such a great experience for me, and it means so much to me that you've been enjoying it. So thank you for listening, and thank you for staying engaged. I have so many ideas for where to take this, and so many fantastic people to talk to in the near future for more excellent Third Story episodes. And I'm going to take a little break in the podcast production schedule to prepare new episodes for you. And I'll come back in a couple of months. So this is the last episode of what I'm calling Season 1. Yes, it's been nearly a 2-year season, but isn't that the wonderful thing about podcasts? They can be so many things. I love connecting with people during these conversations when the microphone disappears and I just lock in with a guest. That's what I'm looking for when I do these, and that's why I'm so excited that today's episode is the last one of the season. It features singer-songwriter Becca Stevens. Becca's been on the scene in New York for over a decade, primarily in the jazz world, but she also lives comfortably in the world of pop and folk. And when I say folk, I mean really folk music, like Appalachian folk music. We spent a lovely evening at her kitchen table, sharing a bottle of wine and getting to know one another, and it was the night before she left for the tour that she's on right now. In fact, as I post this, I'm pretty sure she's about to take the stage in Paris, so have a great gig, Becca. I love how candid and relaxed our conversation was. We talked about how important it is to allow yourself to stay creatively vulnerable and take chances. She talked about how to overcome writer's block and the benefit of lack of time when it comes to the creative process. Some ideas I took with me: the act of self-discovery and development is a limitless, infinite, inward journey. Swirl that one around for a minute before you spit it back out. Also, she talked about some of the things that female performers have to consider before starting a family that perhaps men don't. Rather than telling you more about the episode, let's get started with it. Before I play our conversation, here's Becca Stevens' song Imperfect Animals from her album Perfect Animal.
I wanna leave you time, plenty of space so that I'm still the muse when you write. I wanna take it easy on the inner child, break out and fight the hand holds me down, and take my cues from the horse's mouth. I wanna hold every moment in my own hands, feel every breath that I've taken, love you the way that I know I can. It's impossible to live in parables, 'cause we by nature are imperfect animals. These hips can carry all your kids. I'll be the perfect mix of what you have and what you miss. We'll grow lovely, some perfect leaves on our branches. Steady, keep steady feet while we're dancing, to set the pace for our grandkids. 'Cause it's impossible to live in parables, 'cause we by nature are imperfect animals, and it defies design to be a paradigm. perfection is a perfect place to start. It's impossible to live in parables, 'cause we by nature are imperfect animals.
We might get a solid 1 minute out of this candle.
Okay. All right, let's
We'll put it on its
absorb
little candle stand, living on the edge.
We don't actually know each other.
Except for bona fide.
1 week ago,
Yeah.
we met. I saw you singing with Jacob Collier. Mm-hmm. Even though we have never actually sat at a table and talked and had a drink like we're doing right now, I do feel in some way like I have some kind of a sense of where you have, I don't want to say where you've been, but we have a lot of mutual friends. I've seen you sing, and I feel like you have been part of this community here and this crew of people that are collaborating and working with each other.
That's cool.
Having said that, I think that this year seems to have repositioned you a little bit in the world, maybe not among your friends, but in the way the rest of the world might be seeing you. Do you feel like this has been a transformational or a transitional 12 months for you?
Ooh, I haven't thought of it like that, but it has. Yeah, but it didn't feel like a kablam this year kind of a thing. It's felt like the undertow has been going on for a few years. Maybe it's the whole Saturn returns thing.
You think that's what's going on? You think Saturn is returning and that's what's changing your life?
Probably. I'm just kidding, but who knows? I mean, I think the record has something to do with it, which I've been working on for years. I had been working on for years before it came out. And I think that with every decade, I'm getting a clearer vision of what I want to keep on board and what is not beneficial to me in music and in everything. So turning 30 was an exciting decade because I just had this clarity, something about saying goodbye to the 20s and being like, oh, okay, from now on I'm only going to do the things I really want to do, you know?
I do know that. Well, let's unpack that a little bit before we get to 30, though. So what were like you talk about letting go of some of the things that you don't want to keep, deciding which are the pieces that you do want to keep. So where were you coming from before you turned 30? Like, how would you sort of summarize the previous 10 to 15 years? Like, who were you when you started to come into yourself?
There's the financial component in the beginning of anyone's music career when you're starting out, especially in a place like New York, where everything is expensive. You have to say yes to everything in order to survive, both to eat dinner and pay your rent, and also to keep your name in the public's eye so that you can keep moving forward. When I got out of college, and during my last couple years of college, I was doing tons of different kinds of things, some of which I really liked a lot, some would really bum me out, and then some I could either sort of take it or leave it. Over the years, it's been a process of cutting the fat, as my friend Kelly would say. That included finding what the core focuses were going to be and finding a way to make more time and to be able to support myself from my own music, which is still a path that I'm on, but also finding a balance between all the things that I love to do. And so there's my music, which is like at the core, my band and my music, and then collaborations that really bring me a lot of excitement and joy. And that's like writing collaborations and also collaborations where I'm just a singer, which I love. I love that too. I like to not play the guitar and just sing with awesome people. Another part of the triangle that's really, really important to me is teaching and being a part of the new generation of music.
Helping to foster the development of the
Yes,
next generation.
It inspires me. I love it for that reason. It inspires me and balances what I do. And then I also love teaching songwriting, which sounds funny. How do you teach songwriting? But working on songwriting with a student is like one of the most beneficial things to my songwriting that I can do.
How did you learn songwriting? How did you start songwriting?
When I was a kid, picking up a guitar and kind of messing around, you know.
What were you listening to when you were a kid?
When I was in middle school, I went through a pretty heavy Bjork phase and a pretty heavy Tori Amos phase. In high school, I was obsessed with Bjork and Radiohead and also got into jazz pretty heavily. Like, I was studying classical guitar, and jazz was like my secret world, or like my rebellion. There was something about it that was so different from what I was studying, and it like balanced me in this really cool way.
When you were going through your Bjork and your Tori Amos phase and then your secret clandestine jazz phase, were you trying to imitate anything? What were your early songs like? What did they sound like?
To me, kind of similar to some of the stuff that I write now. It was like, I wasn't trying to imitate anything. It was more like I was trying to express something emotionally that didn't fit into words. My earliest approach would have been to move to the instrument inspired by a feeling, maybe joy, maybe heartbreak, maybe some kind of angsty teenage feeling, and then find a way to express that feeling with the guitar, maybe put it in an open tuning, and then find some moving shape that like resonated with the feeling, and then from there a melody might emerge. And then once the melody emerged, I would get a sense of what the song was, and then at that point it's a puzzle and moving things around. Eventually the puzzle is like somewhat complete, and then vowels start to emerge out of the melody, and then last but not least, you know, painstakingly come up with words that I like, which is the hardest part. But that process has changed a lot over the years. I have 100 different approaches now, but at that point that was what was the most normal.
It's interesting to hear you talk about sometimes writing in open tunings. I think writing in an open tuning just gives you a little bit of mystery about what's happening. I mean, you don't have as much stuff to fall back on. You don't have as much, as many habits. You kind of have to follow your ear as opposed to your hands. That's
something that I recommend often as a solution to students who are feeling stuck. Like if you are getting too aware of theoretically what you're doing, and you need to be free again, it's like, oh, well, just even if you don't play the guitar, or even better, if you don't play the guitar, write a song on an instrument you don't understand, or if you do understand the guitar, put it in a funky tuning, and then you'll be set free and you're using your ears again. Another reason why I used a lot of open tunings, I guess before I studied guitar, it was just that I liked having those like ringing, open, resonant, the open strings ringing, and the sort of like rubs and clusters. But after I studied classical guitar, I developed some tendinitis in my arms. One of the things that would make it fire up were a lot of like holding bar chords for long periods of time. And so I was using open tunings almost out of necessity at that point.
I guess I kind of associated with you with a community of jazz musicians. I saw you as a member of the jazz community. There's this constant tai chi that's happening between stepping in and out of the worlds of what is and isn't idiomatically jazz.
Yeah.
I think your previous records sat right on the fence. I think the newest record is difficult to call a jazz record.
Yeah.
And yet I still see you as a member of that community and as a singer who's as much a jazz singer as a singer-songwriter. Do you think about these things?
Thank you. I feel like you get me. If I was writing this, I would quote the thing that you just said about the Tai Chi being in and out of the jazz bubble. I love that. I relate to that, even though it's not a controlled Tai Chi. It's very much just a natural movement of what I'm drawn to at the time. And I think I'll always be rooted in some way in the jazz community because of the time that I've spent here and the people that I love that I'm around. Just in the same way that I'll always be rooted in bluegrass and Appalachian folk music and classical music because of my father and my upbringing in North Carolina and the Blue Ridge Mountains, and and like singing in a family band at a very young age, performing that kind of music.
So what was that like? What does your dad play?
What doesn't he play? I'm like walking in his basement right now. He plays banjo, fiddle, guitar, mandolin, hurdy-gurdy, hammer dulcimer, piano, anything stringed, anything folky.
And when you were growing up, did you spend a lot of time in the basement?
We had rehearsals down there.
So what was the band?
The Tune Mammals.
And what is that? What was the format? How many people are in the band?
3 kids, 2 parents. I'm the youngest, so at 2 years old I was on stage performing. By the age at 6 we made our second record, and I was just as much a part of the band as anyone else. And he also wrote musicals that we performed in. I performed in one of his musicals when I was 2. There's a picture on the wall over there if you want to see it. On the turtle.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah. Do you want to see it right now?
Yeah.
Take it off the wall. So that's probably age 5, maybe 4.
So what's funny is your dad, I guess it's like Appalachian style, but he looks like he lives in Bushwick in this picture. Doesn't he? Doesn't he look like a Brooklyn guy? He's a
hunter.
He's got Converse on. He's got like kind of faded jeans and a plaid shirt and a. Does he have a beard?
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like he's like making artisanal pickles. Doesn't he look like a Brooklyn guy?
He's a groundbreaker.
Yeah.
There is a song in this musical where Bill the rabbit raps. He's a rippin' rappin' rabbit.
Oh.
And my dad is one of the fathers of rap music. Yeah.
So that was your childhood. Family music, family band, musicals.
Yeah.
How did that affect your sense of harmony?
That's a really good question. My dad and my brother are both composers, and I took a year off after studying classical guitar. I took a year off to sing in a band with my brother. So both of them have been huge influences in my life musically. And my mom is a singer, and I grew up hearing her practice really like complex contemporary opera and classical music and stuff like through the floorboards. I just could hear her singing all the time. And my sister was a dancer when I was growing up, so there was like always this musical influence. But as far as like harmony, I grew up thinking that the music that my dad was listening to was normal, which it was not. And the music that my dad was writing was normal, which it was not. Mm-hmm. Like, we used to beg him to play the G-Spot Tornado, that Frank Zappa tune in the car.
Okay.
But we didn't call it that, obviously. I think we called it the Bidibidibidibit song or something. And he used to play this, like, really bizarre Irish music in the car, and when we were doing the dishes and stuff. And I've come back to some of that music and been like, that's why strange meters sound normal to me, and that's why I love dissonance, and because it was just always there.
It seems like early on in your concept of your band, there were always these definitely interacting vocal parts, right? Like you found a group of musicians that could also sing, and you started developing vocal arrangements. It's a big part of the identity of the sound.
Yeah.
People kind of, sometimes you sing in unison, but a lot of times there's this call and response, there's these answers, and there's interlocking things. And also rhythmically, there's all this weird interlocking stuff. It's been, it seems like from just listening to your Becca Stevens band records, like there was always this rhythmic interplay. It's funny that you say, oh, odd meters feel familiar to me too.
Yeah, and I think that also has to do with writing on the guitar and having the right hand be kind of like a dancer. The movements of the fingers having just as much to do with the meter as, like, you know, say if the right hand is playing like the eighth notes, and then it's like when you change the chord, it's like a new bar, you know? I don't think that the rhythmic, like the meter of the music, had much to do with the bandmates. I think, if anything, just like the aesthetic has more to do with having their voices in my mind. Voices, both their singing voices and their like musical personalities in my mind when I write the music. You know, when we first got together in 2005 or 6, we weren't all singing. And the band went through a lot of transformations over the years. And then at one point, we were drummerless, and Colin had left the band, and it was just the three of us. And I was like, you know, I really miss that third harmony. Can you try to do it, Chris? And he was like, I don't know if I'll be able to do it and play the bass at the same time, but I'll try. And we had this rehearsal at his apartment, and he played it almost perfectly the first time. I mean, that guy is like unbelievable. He's a beast.
It's kind of incredible to me to hear you say when we got together in 2005 or 2006. It goes back to sort of where I started, which is, this is a year where you've been on the road a lot. You put a record out on a big label. You, I think, have shifted into a slightly different place in your career. And when you look, and I said, does it feel like a transitional year for you? I mean, this is a band and a project that started 10 years ago of you singing your songs and putting together a sort of an established band of people that are committed to the project. That's a long time. And I think in a lot of ways, people probably outside of the scene who might not have known you before would consider you to be an emerging artist right now. But you're a decade into this project.
It takes time. It's crazy. I mean, I guess it doesn't always take time. Sometimes people get famous overnight, but for me it's been a long, steady slope that I love every step of, but it's not, I don't feel it going in spikes. I feel it just going. You know, people say, how do you feel like this record is different from the last one? Or even your question at the beginning of our conversation about, do you feel like this is a transformative year? Part of me just sees, how long have I been in New York? 13, 14 years of just growth, of just like this consistent movement. Obviously, like, it's nuanced, and there are some years that feel different than others, but yeah, there's like oh, this is boring. You can cut this part.
I'm gonna cut. This is where I'll cut in some commercials for something.
Okay, commercial time, people. Since I don't have any formal sponsorship, it falls upon me to advertise something to you. Today's product is the critically acclaimed solo recording Mucho Leo by me, Leo Sidran. It features 10 original songs, all completely performed and arranged by myself alone in a room. In the same room I'm coming to you from right now, as a matter of fact. The French women's magazine Femme Actuelle calls it a coup de cœur. When I Google translated that, I discovered that it means it's an instant classic. I don't know about all that, but I do know that it's an authentic statement, and I'm proud to tell you about it. Mucho Leo by Leo Sidran. Now back to the conversation with Becca Stevens.
It's funny when you talk about how this arranging voice started to emerge as you were writing, because you kind of had this palette in mind that you knew you were writing for. And it kind of makes me think about the way you approach arranging covers, too, because I think some of it is the charm and the unexpected move of taking an Usher song or a Frank Ocean song and putting it in your voice. I know you're aware of the kind of sneaky surprise factor of doing these cover songs by pop artists or R&B artists. Yeah. But how do you decide how do you approach doing something like that? And how do you choose the songs that you want to cover? And then how do you make it your own?
I approach them as myself. I haven't yet ever had the desire to embody the person that performed the song that I'm covering. I was the singer of Travis Sullivan's Bjorkestra for a number of years. In that setting too, like even though I listened to so much of Bjork's music, I found that, you know, trying a few different ways of approaching that process, the way that it worked the best was to honor the integrity of her geniusness, but without losing myself in the process. And that's the same way that I approach the arranging other covers. It's like I try to, if it's working well, then I think it should give the person who's hearing it a sense of familiarity and like a lightness of like, oh, I know that. And then at the same time say, but this is interesting. Who is this? And what is this sound? And maybe they want to, from that point, hear something original. So it's like a gateway.
Mm-hmm. Considering that strategy, however, I think your version of the Steve Winwood song is pretty out there.
Beep. Well, I was late. Thanks.
I mean, it's a very joyful song.
Uh-huh.
And you made some effort to wring a little of the joy out of it and put a little bit of subversiveness in it.
That's in the lyric too, though, I found. When I pulled the lyric out of context, there's a bittersweet longing in the lyric, this like an unsettled, there has to be something better than this out there.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? And on top of that, I think I have a tendency to make everything a little sadder.
It's funny, I was listening to the record today and I was thinking, you do have a natural magnetic pull towards,
in that direction.
Towards that.
Yeah.
The sort of underside.
That's something
things.
I've been like battling since I was a kid. I remember in high school, I went to this boarding school for the first 2 years of high school. We did an art project where we were using, I think it was like color symbolic color usage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. You had to make some sort of freestanding sculpture. And I didn't have a plan going into it. I just started creating something. And in the end, I remember like walking down the hallway towards my sculpture and going, whoa, that's really dark. And like realizing for the first time how terrifying this thing was. And now I will describe it for you. It was a rope hanging from the ceiling, like a noose, like a rope that was tied around an open book that had like red paint and hair stuck to it. And then the red paint was like dripping down on the floor in a puddle. And for some reason, like when I was creating it, I was like, oh, and the red symbolizes this strength, and the hair is, and the book is like, you know, history, and there was something about, and but I was like, it wasn't until I stepped back and looked at it, and I was like, whoa, okay. And my teacher was like, are you okay? Are you? I remember making like a little demo homemade recordings for my family one year for Christmas, and I put it in everybody's stocking, and I was so excited about it. And like 4 or 5 people were like, Becca, are you okay? Because the songs were like really melancholy and just sad, and I didn't realize that they were, because it was just, I don't know.
See, what's funny and interesting to me about this is I've been thinking about the opposite phenomenon today in particular, about people who do beautiful, uplifting work, and so the expectation is that they're going to be sweet, happy people, and when you meet them, they're miserable.
Like comedians.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or you see the opposite with like hard, like heavy rockers. Right. You see this show where they've like destroyed equipment and thrown up on stage and, you know, like done all this like screaming and just like violent, and then afterwards you meet them, it's like, oh great, I'm so glad you enjoyed the show, great man, thanks.
And so you're a little bit in there, right, where it's
Maybe.
Like, because I think you have a very sunny disposition in person, and yet there's this thing that obviously is inside of you that comes out very automatically.
I wonder why that is.
When you sing, whether or not you're singing your own song or just when you perform, do you go somewhere else, or are you very present when you sing?
Like, mentally?
I mean, are you? Yeah.
I was like, I sing in the shower.
Right.
funny to put it into words. It depends on how well it's going. If it's not going well, then I'm thinking about it too much and maybe judging the process too much. When it is going well, the best that it can go is when I almost like come out of something and I'm like, whoa, what happened? You know? That happened recently. I'm trying to remember. Oh, with Jacob.
Did it happen with Jacob?
Yeah, it happened. There was, I think the end of each coming night, we did this sort of, it was just like vamping for a while. And I remembered at the end kind of opening my eyes and looking at him and being like, wow, that was really special. I don't know what happened, but it felt right.
That was a show with a lot of moving pieces and absolutely nothing to fall back on.
That was so vulnerable. I was terrified in the first set. We rehearsed for the first time that day. And he's so fluent on everything. And I found myself like kind of freaking out in rehearsal. I was like, are you sure you want me to play the guitar? I really should practice this, because I'm like, you know, even just simple stuff, I was kind of panicking a little bit. But then I think that it ended up being, I mean, I don't know how you felt about it, but there was something about the contrast of our artistry. There was something that just ended up working. But
was it his idea to ask you to do it with him?
Yes.
Or how did that come together?
Yeah, well, we played together on Mike League's Snarky Puppy Family Dinner No. 2. Mm-hmm. We didn't play together, but we met there, and we both performed on it. The moment I met him, I was like, oh, there's my little brother. You know, like, there was a small firework that went off in the room, and we just got along extremely well. And we both really loved each other's music, and so had this dream of collaborating. And I was talking to him on the phone after the family dinner thing, and we were like we have to stay in touch with each other. So we put like a monthly phone date in our calendars, like a reoccurring Google Calendar phone date. And then we also put, I think it was like 6 months after that conversation, we put in our calendar, we need to have performed together by this time. Uh-huh. And this show was actually, it occurred a solid 2 months before that deadline, which is pretty impressive.
It's cool that you went into this mystery black hole on a show like that, where there were so many things to be thinking about. There was nothing to count on. And I said something to you after that show that you lit up about. I said, only with the possibility of failure is there the possibility of success.
I gotta write this down.
And you were like, yes! And
only, I'm gonna like tweet that and quote you. Only with the possibility of failure. This is so good. Is the possibility of...
I think I would say is... Only with the possibility of failure is the possibility of success. That's perfect.
This fits into the theme of my week, so thank you. Yeah.
But I think it was also the theme of when I saw you perform then, which was like...
Totally vulnerable.
But it's not going to work unless I allow myself to be vulnerable in this position. You weren't going to be able to do it without that vulnerability. There was no other way to get through it.
That is, I think, one of the most important things about music, period. That's the only way that you're going to grow. There are great artists who do the same thing forever, and I respect that. But for me, I would die.
So how do you deal with that now that you have the expectation when you're on the road of delivering more or less the same product?
It's never the same in me, because I'm like an emotional perfectionist, and emotions, like the way that you connect with your emotions and then connect them outward during performance to an audience, the search for whatever it is that I'm looking for there is infinite. So there's never an end to that. So even if it were the same song 100 times every night, it would never be the same. And depending on the mood that I'm in, or how tired I am, or the biggest influence is the energy of the room. It's never the same.
That's such an incredible thing to say. I'm an emotional perfectionist. You know, it does actually...
Did I say that?
You did. I said I'm an emotional perfectionist. I don't even know what it means, but I do know that you are thinking a lot about perfection and imperfection. What's the line in the song? Imperfection is a perfect place to start.
What song? I don't know what you're talking about.
Perfect Animal.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's right. Imperfection is a perfect way to start.
So this is something that you're obviously living with all the time. Mm-hmm. Seeking something and appreciating that you will not achieve it, but it's in the search for it that...
You're really good at this.
That meaning happens.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think probably that's always been a part of my personality, at least since I can remember. But it was such an important part of Perfect Animal, the record, the process, and as obsessively inspecting every tiny part of everything, every layer that was recorded. I edited it myself, which was a terrible idea, but it was also the best idea. Did you
not just vocals? You edited the whole record yourself, or you edited your vocals?
Scott Salter, the producer, helped me with a lot of the editing. Like he did a lot of the layered percussion and the bass and some of the keyboards, and then I did some of the keyboards and all the vocals and all the guitars, if not most of the guitars. And it was the first time I'd ever done that, and I loved it. But it also took way too long.
What do you think it was like for him to turn over the sessions to you and let you loose with it?
I think he probably was relieved and also grateful that I was up for the challenge. And I definitely think he trusted me to do a good job. He gave me a little tutorial, and then he trusted my choices for sure. Because we saw eye to eye on a lot of that.
What did you heard of his that you liked, that you wanted for yourself?
I think the thing that he sent me like a Dropbox of a bunch of different stuff that he'd done, and I think that the one that really lit me up was his original music. The way that he handled the drums. It wasn't just a drum kit. It was like the drum kit had been taken apart, and all in it, even the hardware was like taken apart and then reassembled by layering each part with its own track, with its own compression and effect, and it just was like the most mind-blowing thing. On top of that, the low end of his recordings, like the sub, the bass end of his recording was like really satisfying.
I totally agree. I think that his drum sound and his bottom end is unreal and super identifiable, and I love the way you describe it, because it is... I don't know what it's like as a drummer to have to play on those records. It's so much about the drums.
I think Jordan learned more... I mean, he's like one of the greatest drummers in the whole world, but I think he learned more in that session. You should ask him. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was like lifelong lesson for him working with Scott, because there was a point in the tracking where he just had to kind of let go of everything familiar and just trust. Yeah. And it was really incredible watching. There was, I think it was like 10 days of, man, it was really incredible. Yeah.
And then you brought stuff home and you edited a bunch of it here.
I was on the road a lot, and I had this like portable setup, and would do it in hotel rooms and dressing rooms. I was the most unsocial person in the world during that time, because it was like any time I stopped, I was like, ooh, I really need to.
Had you written the lyric to Perfect Animal before you started editing the record?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But that song is Imperfect Animals, and then I wrote the title of the album after the editing.
Tell me about that. You had a song called Imperfect Animals.
I think you've already figured it out, but it's sort of like the stepping back and seeing what felt like stepping back and seeing that the process in itself was perfect and I wouldn't change anything. That even with the struggle and the what's the opposite of struggle? Like the not achievements, but what's the word for like you celebrate each other's
achievement.
Is it? Yeah, I guess.
Yes. Successes.
Yes.
Success?
Success, sure.
Success.
Yeah. That all of them together, this yin-yang, like all of that together created this perfect animal, that I wouldn't change in a piece of. And then also there were difficult times when I was tracking the voices, and then when I was editing, I would listen back and be like, oh, this part where I'm on the verge of tears is really beautiful. It's like, you don't want something that's just emotionally stable.
Well, so that I read this, that so you have this like 3-year or 1-year period of tracking the record and editing it and making it a perfect thing, and you've made your choices and you can live with them. Mm-hmm. And then you go in a very short window of time and sing the record.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a beautiful balance to the rest of the record. I wonder if you had been perfecting your vocals and re-singing them a million times. I mean, maybe you did re-sing them and then you got to this last vocal, but I wonder if it would have had the same emotional impact if you hadn't allowed yourself to be, again, vulnerable for the vocal part of the record. It makes sense to me because there is this immediacy in the way you're singing, and there is this vulnerability in the way that you're singing. And I think it would be easily to produce that out of the record. Singing
is home. It's the most comfortable thing that I can do musically or just like in general. It's very comfortable for me. And that was the most challenging week of my life. I mean, it was crazy the amount of work that I cut out for myself. And even then I wasn't done. We were trying to have everything stack up so that all that was left at that point was just to lay down the vocals. So I was doubling the guys' vocals and also singing my leads. But
and did you have guides the whole time up until then? Did you have any kind of guide vocals up until then?
Yeah, I had a scratch track that I recorded in a bathroom at the place where we tracked the band. But each night I would go back to Kate McGarry and Keith Gans's house in Durham. They're incredible. And edit until I fell asleep because I was still editing the guys' vocals. And then in the morning I would edit some more and then go into the studio and sing and then be editing on the breaks. And it was just like, there was so much work still to be done. And I was singing all day long every day for at least 10 hours every day, nonstop. I would wake up and think, oh my gosh, my voice has never been this tired. But then somehow the strength and the ability to do another 10 hours would just come. It felt a lot like some sort of like a hike, like a really intense hike or marathon or something. Yeah, it really did. And the air conditioning was broken, and I was in this like stuffy. Maybe it was broken, or maybe it was just couldn't be turned on because it would be too loud or something. And I was in this small room by the bathroom, and I was like just like sweating constantly and really like digging deeper into the strength of what I could do than I ever have. Like it was. When I finally finished on the last night, I remembered like just standing there and being like, I did it. You know, it was really a crazy process.
So what do you think you want to do now?
I have a lot of things I want to do now. I'm in the process of recording a record of my music with string quartet, arrangements by all these different arrangers and composers, and I'm going to do some too, and I've been recording it in my brother's studio in Winston-Salem. His name is William Stevens, and my dad's name is William Stevens too, and my dad did some of the arrangements, and my brother did some of the arrangements. It's a really special project. And then I also have been really craving doing a solo record.
A solo record meaning a Becca Stevens record and not a Becca Stevens band record?
Yeah, but more than that, like, since the beginning I've made these, like, kind of like home demos of my songs before I bring them to the band that involves a lot of layering vocals, and I don't know, I have a vision for that, but I don't want to go too far into it right now.
Do you know that Camille Lafitte record?
Yeah, with the red yarn?
With the red yarn, and it's one thing, I think she sings B or F sharp through the whole thing.
Yeah, totally. That sort of like the choral writing is the most natural thing for me. In fact, a lot of my songs start out as a bunch of layered voices and then it becomes a song from there. But I love the voice, and I love creating creating structure out of just layering voices. That's a really cool reference.
It's actually interesting also that you say this thing about how you demo your stuff yourself, and part of the reason I asked if you had any guide or scratch vocals on the record is because I was kind of half expecting you to say that you couldn't beat the scratch vocals. You know, there's something about those
no.
demo-y vocals that sometimes it's easy to fall in love with.
There's something really special about the first take. And I have had instances. There was something recently I sang with a really awesome drummer named Guillaume Flouzat. And the video that he had, the promotional video for this record that he put out is the single from the record, and on my side of the video it was one take. It was like, it blew my mind when I watched it. I was like, I did that? One take wonder? So I'm capable of it. But there's this other side to the studio. For some reason, that I feel like the more takes I do, the better I get. And then there's this sort of like G spot again. There's like a sweet spot where I've gotten it's gotten as good as it can be, and then it starts to sort of taper down, and I'll be okay, we gotta stop, you know. And
you think you can identify it? You think you know yourself?
Yeah, totally. Where it's like, okay, we gotta stop. It just stopped getting better.
Do you think you approach it differently when it's your own record as opposed to when you're guesting on somebody else's album?
Yes, and when I'm guesting and I'm only singing, and I can just go into that world of just singing something beautifully, and then I'm less attached, I think is what you're getting at, is like I'm less attached to the end result. I don't really have as strong a vision of exactly how it needs to be, and so I'm more like accepting of whatever the final product ends up being. And I often find that it surprises me later because I listen to it and I'm like, I really like that, and I wonder how many great takes I've shrugged off because I was like so obsessed with it being a certain way.
Well, that's the question, right? And I think in a way, you know, that's where this idea of your jazz heart or bones or core, yeah. In the sort of jazz philosophy, as you get older, you simplify and you sort of come down to your most essential self. At least traditionally, that's kind of how it was. You know, it's one of those rare things as opposed to popular music that sort of punishes you and you can age out of it in a certain way. In jazz, you sort of age into it.
Totally.
And part of that aging into it is like learning to discard. Even you said, I'm in a process of discarding.
Yeah.
And deciding what I want to keep.
And that's infinite. It's not like you eventually get to a place where there's nothing left. It's almost like this infinite inward movement, yes. Something.
I love that. You can always go deeper in to yourself, right?
Totally.
There's always another place to go.
It never ends. I think all music is that way, but I definitely see it in jazz. To me, it's one of the only genres that can reach over into all the other genres and still be jazz, which is why it's such a hard genre to kind of like break out of, because there's no edge. There's nothing to break out of. There's no end to it. The lines are very blurry, I think, and it expands all the time.
You know, you say it's hard to break out of jazz. You know, Lady Gaga is in the process of breaking into it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's easier to break into it than it is to break out of in a strange way. I don't know if that's true, but from her point of view, it's like the most punk thing she can do is make a jazz record.
Yeah, because it's so not what anyone would have expected.
Exactly.
I was on the stage after her at Monterey. I was really blown away. She's a force. And I saw her walking backstage in this massive gown. You know, that woman knows how to do business.
So what has that been like for you that's a jazz example, but as you sort of have...
Jazz-ample.
That's a jazz-ample.
Mm-hmm.
But as you have started to rub elbows with...
I didn't get to rub elbows with her, that's for sure.
Well,
she had like 6 bodyguards.
Right. No, I think she's difficult to rub elbows with, and that was at a jazz festival. But have you started to interact with the world of singer-songwriter pop, and are the audiences changing? Are the kinds of people that are coming to you changing now?
A little bit.
And how does that feel?
I would like it to be easier to interact with more people. You know, it would be cool to go on the road, like opening for a band that's completely outside of my world.
Like who?
Gosh, if I could pick... Kimbra or Emily King or Radiohead or Hiatus Coyote. I mean, some of them even
I think
they
those are all
like
in your world.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, I mean, my friend Kaveh plays bass with Kimbra. Emily King went on a tour with where some of my friends were playing in Sarah Bareilles' band. So it's not like totally out of the question. It's just I feel like these people are sort of like on the other side of some sort of invisible wall that doesn't really exist. But
who makes the wall? Who built the wall?
No one. It's a mental wall. Yeah. It's like when you see someone in a magazine and you're like, oh, they're prettier than me or something. Like, it's not real, the wall. But I don't know. I don't know what the wall is. I know I've been sort of dreaming about making a jazz record. I love jazz. I definitely went through a period where I was interested in other things, but lately I've been really enjoying singing standards again. It's this really beautiful playground, to know something so intimately, to know a song so intimately, like a standard, and then you can do whatever you want with it, and it's different every time. I love that. I've been thinking about making a standards record with my friends, just people in New York that I love playing music with that I don't get to see very often.
Becca Stevens on the magnetic pull back to jazz. Here's something you can do right now. Go to iTunes and subscribe to the Third Story podcast. Even if you don't listen using iTunes, it's the best way to keep this thing going and growing, and to reach as many people as possible on the iTunes store. So thank you for listening. And now, the final act of my conversation with Becca Stevens.
Do you practice?
No, if I have time to make music, it would be to write.
How are you writing right now? Do you put pressure on yourself to write? Do you keep a schedule?
It really helps me if I have a deadline or some kind of commission, or it just sort of depends on where my focus is. Like right now, I'm home for a week and then I'm out for a month and a half, and so I haven't been writing this week. I just joined this online writing club. My boyfriend actually was one of the founding members, but then he got kicked off because he didn't he got 3 strikes. You have to submit a song every week, and then each time that you fail to submit, you get a strike, and then when you get 3 strikes, you're kicked out of the group. But he was recently readmitted back into the group.
It seems like such a commitment, and I know I've talked to quite a few people who Joe Laurie wrote her whole record in a writing club.
Yeah, exactly. Hers was there would be a thematic word at the beginning of each week, and then you had to use the word in your song in some way, which I think is really cool. Having that instigator, I was thinking about this. I'm always able to write. It's making the time for it that's hard for me.
Crazy hard.
And I've heard about people that feel like they lose their inspiration and they sit down and they have nothing to write about, which is terrifying to me. But then I wonder how much of that is just maybe that person is super busy and they just need to make the time for it, and then also on top of that have ways of unlocking it, which is something that I'm working on all the time, with students. And I have so many games and puzzles and different kinds of things that you can do to inspire.
Yeah. I go through intense periods of blockage.
Dry spells?
And yet, I make my living writing music for TV commercials, and I write a television commercial every day because I have to make a living.
So then how can you say that?
I'm totally aware of the fact that they're in opposition, these two ideas, that I'm able to write on commission with lyrics if I need to. If somebody's I need a song about this, I can deliver a coherent lyric. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but sometimes it's good, sometimes I think it's okay, but that's the whole point of writing, is that you just, you kind of do it and then you have something to start with. But if on that same day I sat down and tried to write a song for myself, 9 times out of 10 I would say, well, it wasn't there for me today.
Weird. Okay, so do you like the songs that you write for the commercials and stuff? Are you happy with them? Satisfied?
In the same way that you are more willing to leave a first take on somebody else's record than you are on your own record, I'm sort of more willing to accept a lyric that I wrote for a commercial, or even for somebody else. If I'm in a co-write with somebody, I've done some co-writing with people, I'm much more free to say, well, it's for you, it's not for me, or it's not my personal statement. I think when I start to think, oh, this is my statement, that's when I start to get locked up. So
Interesting.
what I want to do is
I have so many ideas.
Tell me, because
Yeah.
I think I need to get out of my own way. And
That's a big part of it, yeah, for sure. But I think the way to go about doing that is the tricky part. It's almost like you have to step aside and be your own coach and ask yourself, what is this song about? And then if you try to avoid the question, you shake yourself and smack yourself in the face and say, what is this song about? Oftentimes that is the thing that keeps you from being able to finish the songs, that you don't know what the song is about,
Yeah.
so how are you going to finish it? And what's so much simpler about the commercial writing is that someone's given you a framework. They've given you a product, or they've given you a story, or a length, or a vibe, or something.
Yeah.
And so you immediately have some sort of inspiration.
It's funny that you say, what is this song about, is so crucial, because, you know, when you talked about your own process, at least your preliminary process of writing songs when you were starting it, was a vowel sound will emerge out of an emotional place.
And that
then,
took forever. And I don't have that luxury anymore to wait for a lightning bolt of inspiration, or to wait for the perfect song to fall in my lap. That's happened to me before, and it's such a blessing when it happens, but I don't have that luxury anymore, which is also a blessing. There was a song that I wrote for Ambrose Akinmusire's record, and I said to him, well, what do you want me to write it for? The instrumentation? Do you want me the instrumentation of your band? Do you want it to be about anything in particular? And he said, the only rule that you have is to make it from the perspective of a homeless person. And I was like, just immediately wheels are turning and lights are going off, and the inspiration starts to flow because I was given a framework.
Totally. And
all of a sudden, instead of having this endless empty canvas, I had like a very specific thing to work with. So I went to one of his shows and I was listening to his music, but then I had a pen and paper in my lap, and I did a stream of consciousness character development about this homeless person that I just created in my imagination, and wrote every detail of his life that I could think of, similar to how an actor would develop their own character inside of themselves, even if you only end up seeing like a 0.25% of that story on the screen. It's like still it's in them, fueling their inspiration. So this was like at the time it was a new process for me, and it freed me up so much, and I wrote that song much more quickly than I would have written one of my own songs.
Yes.
And it was about more than it not being mine, because that was still mine. I performed it on his record, and it was still in my name, and it was still a representation of me. But I think that it was the way that I went writing about the song. When I sat down at the piano, I knew that character's whole life, and I knew what I wanted to say. So that was a big game changer for me, and I've tried to make that be a regular part of my songwriting since then.
I wonder what it'll be like for you when it's free, when it really is your project.
Well, I used that method a little bit on Perfect Animal. It was more subtle because it was still in sort of this framework of my own emotional world. I mapped out the record before it was finished. I mapped out what I had so far. I made this chart where I wrote down the song title, and then the key, the vibe, the feel, the meter. Not the meter, the sort of like the BPM.
Tempo,
I found out that I...
you like a certain tempo?
Yeah.
Which one?
It's like 105 world. But yeah, I
Because
noticed...
it doubles and it goes in half. You have a lot of stuff that
exactly. It's
likes
the
to
right
double.
hand. It's the fucking... sorry, I cursed for the kids.
It's on the web. It's available to you.
I have young fans. I don't want them to hear my sailor words. Okay. But it's okay if they hear just one.
Did you even finish the word? I don't even think you said the whole word.
It was more like a stutter.
Yeah. But it's a tempo that divides and doubles easily.
In my right hand.
Yeah.
Correct. Which means I should probably write more songs on the piano.
Well.
Or without an instrument at all, and start with a metronome. Hear that, guys? Start the song with the metronome, pick the tempo that you want, and then write the next part. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you. I'm going to do that later.
We got there. We got somewhere. Well, speaking of getting somewhere, this is your last free night for like a month and a half.
That's
and then
true.
You're going to go on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you are living in a certain amount of chaos? In order to organize this, we had 40 emails, 10 text messages to try to settle on an evening that, or at any time, morning, afternoon, or evening, that you could accommodate. There are a lot of demands placed on you. Do you feel like you're in control of your life?
I do. I do and I don't. That's a quote from, it's either Best in Show or Waiting for Guffman. Well, I do and I don't. I do and I don't. It's the Christopher Guest's character. What a good and difficult question. Do I feel like I'm in control of my life? I do and I don't. But I like it.
Do you feel like you're going to be able to continue to make a living in music?
Yes. I have to believe it. Otherwise, my life will be like that book in the hallway of my failed prep school experience. Yeah, I think believing is seeing. You just have to believe in it. And then even when you don't, then that, like, if you give up, then that's the reason why it doesn't happen. You know, you can't. There are so many really incredible artists who I think could have been something great, but they gave up. Like, they just didn't have the perseverance that it took to get to the point where it could have happened, you know? Sometimes it takes a really long time. And even that, as I'm saying that, it's like, takes a long time to what? It's not, there's no like, oh, a finish line, we made it. It's just like...
Do you want to have a family?
Yes! I got to. That's like the ultimate, that's the ultimate. Yeah, for me, the big three, performing. Oh, there's 4. Can there be 4?
Sure, that's a chair.
It's blue squarey. Actually, I like chair. I like that because it supports you. So, performing, teaching, writing, and family, love, friends, human connection.
Well, I think you can have love, friends, human connection. The question is, how do you actually get to a place where you feel like you could, comfortably raise a family, living in New York?
I've got friends who are doing it well. To be a female performer who has a child that still needs them every day, it's like terrifying. No matter how you slice it, unless you're a terrible mother, your career will stop for 2 years at least.
Did you see the Nina Simone documentary?
I didn't, but I want to, desperately.
It'll put that in serious perspective for you. She was not able to be
Oh, that kills me.
A present mother.
That runs too deep. Yeah, no, I feel like whenever I do that, which I really want to, I gotta do it right. I've got some great role models. I'm in a band with 2 of them. So, it's like people are never going to forget about Gretchen Parlato, She waited until she was ready to do it, and she is the most amazing mother. Same as Rebecca. Rebecca is the most amazing mother I think I've ever known. And she's just unstoppable. She's such a musical force, and she, is often home alone with Charlie because her husband is Larry Grenadier, and he's like probably one of the busiest bass players on the face of the planet. And yet, I think Rebecca's career is, better than it's ever been. It's like she has this passion and this ability to constantly be like drilling into the core of authenticity,
Is that the concern, that if you sort of take yourself off the market of your career for 2 years, that you're going to be forgotten?
That is one of the concerns. Life moves on without you. If you don't develop a really strong foundation, when you try to come back to it, it won't still be there. That is a fear. Yeah, I think that is a fear. That I have to get my ducks in a row before I do that. But then, some people say, you're never ready to have kids. Would you say that?
I would totally say that.
Yeah.
You kind of have 2 ticking biological clocks, and one of them is your maternal biological clock, and then the other one is your
career.
Which is not that you have to stop singing at any point, but that you maybe want to break through to a certain level by a certain point.
That is there. I didn't realize it until I got in my 30s. I love being 31. Love it. But there is this kind of silent implied pressure in our society, on women particularly, that you just start getting less hot. You know, like in every way, you know, like people don't want to hear what you have to sing anymore when you're like, it's awful. What?
Weird.
I know. And then it doesn't apply as like, you know, you see like Sean Connery is like still good looking.
Yeah, but so is Salma Hayek.
Where is she from?
Mexico.
It's not fair. You have to come up with like a...
Sean Connery's from Scotland.
Yeah, but he's a man. It's not fair.
But what you're saying is men get to get old and still be sex symbols, and women don't? Is that essentially what you're saying?
Mexican women can always be hot, and black women... like, black women get sexier with age.
Right. I think it's funny when you were like, I like what did you say, the new generation of musicians or something, and I was asking you what that was. Mm-hmm. Because I thought you were talking about yourself. And I realized, no, you're talking about... Because you're coming from a position now of having enough experience where you're teaching a new generation of musicians.
Well, I guess it's all perspective, because I would be that to someone else that I'm speaking to. I had this incredible conversation with Diane Reeves. She and Alicia Olatuja. How do you say her last name?
I don't know.
I'm embarrassed because I really like her and would like to be friends with her forever. So the three of us were on a Billy Childs show together doing his Reimagining Laura Nyro project. And we were sitting in the dressing room. I was talking about nerves because I always get nervous every time I perform, no matter what. And the very few times that when I didn't get nervous were like some of my worst performances, because it usually means that I didn't care or something. And Alicia was saying the same thing. And then Diane said, yeah, I was nervous coming out here because you guys are like the sort of like the new young voices, and I was terrified that I, you know, like, what if I don't do a good job and then I'm seen as like this whatever aging. And Alicia and I looked at each other and we were like, what the fuck? Diane, you know, she's a human being and she has fears too. And it's like, anyway, what made me think of that was that you said, like, to some people I would be that.
Yes.
But then when there's like a student coming to me, I see like this is this really important voice and I want to nurture this, because where will they be in 10 years? You never know. They could be the next so-and-so.
Becca Stevens.
But I just thought that was so incredible. She was so inspiring.
Well, I think that's beautiful.
Uh-huh.
And I think that, you know, in a weird way, we should all kind of strive to be in touch with that.
That's why I wrote this down. Only with the possibility of failure is the possibility of sex.
Yes!
You're right in there. Yes. Because, like, she's a perfect example of someone who's still successful because she's constantly recreating herself. When I was watching her perform, it was as if she was, like, tightrope walking on the edge of a skyscraper. Like her toes were always, like, hanging off, and her eyes were closed. I mean, it was just, like total surrender to everything that was happening around her. Like, and vocally, you know, she was just like soaring in all these directions that you would never predict. I was so inspired by her fearlessness. That made me think of that being unafraid of failure, and how with that, like, she's just like constantly growing. And then also backstage, we must have spent like 45 minutes talking about Kendrick Lamar's new record. And she has gone so deep into that record. I thought I was a fanatic. And she has written blogs about it, and she knows the triple symbolism of like every line of every song, and she can tell you what everything is about. And like, she's like, oh, this line, you know, that's about a woman's body and loving the self and love, and like she just knows that record inside and out. And I was talking with Alicia afterwards about how that is another part of why she's still so great, is like she's thirsty for knowledge from every aspect of music. And it's like, this record you associate with like this, it's like a very hip record right now, and she knows it inside and out. On the
Did you make
record.
this record and then license it, or did you get signed and make the record?
I made the record first.
Yeah.
I was planning on putting it out myself. That's why I did the Pledge Music thing. And then at the last minute, there was interest from Universal, and so I delayed the release like a couple times.
And you delivered the record to them. You just delivered the finished record to Universal.
Exactly. It was funny. I was reading comments on YouTube, which I don't do anymore.
Why not?
It's like there's some pretty hateful people in the world, and I think that their outlet is via commenting on things. Typical, she had such a beautiful folky sound, but then she signed to a label and sold out and made this, poppy bullshit. And I just thought it was funny because this is the most authentic record that I've ever made in my life. I had my hands digging through every passageway of the heart of the project. I mean, it was totally in my hands. Every note, everything, every decision, it was me. They were my choices.
That is so interesting, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So people project their narrative on your life.
Exactly, yeah.
And I understand what she's saying, because if
it's
made...
more kind of commercial sounding or whatever. But that was my choice. And that was not a choice. I wasn't going against my truth either. It was that was what I wanted to hear and what I wanted to create, and that was me. Hey, our candle's still going. It's like the menorah.
Yeah. Becca Stevens, thank you so much.
Thank you. Arigatou gozaimashita.
Arigatou gozaimashita. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Hanukkah in October, the candle stayed lit. It's a jazz miracle. If you'd like to know more about Becca Stevens, you can go to third-story.com to see some of my favorite videos of hers, as well as a photo of Becca as a kid with her family band, the Tune Mammals. It's not the exact photo that we talk about in the conversation, but one from the same era. If you enjoyed this conversation, you might also enjoy episodes featuring singers Alan Hampton, Joe Laurie, Janice Siegel, and Satchel. Thank you again for listening. I'm looking forward to being back in your ears again soon for Season 2 of The Third Story.